Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to On Her Side. Today we have our guest with us, Myda Khan Sahiba. Myda, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Jazakallah for having me here today. I'm very excited.
Yes, and so am I. Jazakallah for taking the time to come onto the program. So today we're diving into a topic which I think resonates with absolutely each and every one of us. We oftentimes hear the conversation about women seeking validation or empowerment from men. Mm-hmm. But I think what an even more important question is about how women can celebrate each other and support one another and uplift one another. Mm-hmm. And I really feel like building a sisterhood can be transformative. So I'm really hoping that today's discussion, we can talk about ways to make that vision into a reality.
Yes, inshallah.
Inshallah. So the $1 million question, in the words of my husband, why is it that women are so jealous of one another?
That's a very interesting question. And I think a lot of husbands, have said or made that comment. But if you think about it, women, just like all humans and animals, to compete with one another, right? Like when we look at ancient civilizations or when we look at animals, we find that sort of survival of the fittest, like you're competing with one another. And then when we look at our economical system, right, like capitalism, so we profit off of competing with one another. And so there's limited resources. We're fighting for those resources. So there's a sort of competition. But I think for this topic, when we're talking about women, I think we have been socialized, right? We have been socialized from such a young age to be compared to other women. Mm. Even between sisters, we find that sort of competition, right? Like who's prettier, who's smarter, who has
who's fairer.
Who's fairer, exactly, that sort of conversations. And when you open that can of worm, that competition is endless. Yeah. Right? It just kind of...
It's almost as if we've been conditioned to think that our value only exists when you compare it against others 100%. And their achievements, yes. Right? Yeah. So your value is not your own. It's not an independent entity. It's only in relation to what's around you and what those people have been able to achieve.
Yeah, 100%. Like as in your happiness is contingent upon someone else's like misery almost, right? Yeah. So like the happier they are, the less happy you are, or the happier you are, the less happy they are.
And also just that someone's achievement is going to somehow take away from what you've achieved. Yeah. That's how people feel. It's very easy to sort of lose yourself. Yeah. I think also, it's one thing, like you said, to have this within your home, and certainly it does exist in a natural way. Yeah. But I think that in this day and age, with social media just being so prevalent as well, there's become this unending race, right? To compete, to do better, to achieve more, to be more successful, to be more beautiful.
And it's so interesting because with social media, like when we were growing up, we were being compared to, maybe our brother and sister, or we were
cousins.
Yeah, our cousins or other like kids from the masjid. But growing up, that competition is endless now. Like when you're scrolling social media, you are seeing people from all over the world. So you're competing with people you truly don't even know. Yeah. You know them at a very surface level, and now you are in some sort of competition, right? Yeah. And obviously that is affecting you in so many different ways.
My daughter, she's in grade 5, and even at this age, girls have been, I would say, just conditioned to be, want to be the most popular, to be kind of like the leader of the group, to wear whatever they think is the cool sort of clothes, to wear, to be fashionable at this age. And this is where it starts from, right? It's kind of something that you learn at such a young age, and then you carry it through to adulthood and as parents, etc. There's parenting styles that are compared all the time. There's mothering styles. How are you raising your kids? Your kids reaching different milestones, that's being compared. And like you said, in terms of beauty standards and things like that, it's unattainable sort of ideals, right?
100%. And I think it's interesting because I find myself doing the things that I'm very aware of, There's this concept in sociology where we as humans, we view ourselves from how others perceive us. So it's very important to us in like how others see us, you know? And we carry that from a very young age. But unfortunately, like just the other day too, I said something to my daughter and I compared her to her cousin, and I had to catch myself because even though I was aware of, you know, what that can possibly do for her and what that maybe did for me, I still continue doing that. So you have to be very conscious to break that sort of cycle of parenting as well.
Yes. So where do you think this comes from? I know you said, you know, a lot of it is just very natural, and it is to a certain degree.
Yeah.
I mean, I've caught myself thinking, you know, when I hear about somebody achieving a specific academic milestone or professional milestone or life milestone, I remember also thinking to myself, oh gosh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I had that. So to a degree, I think it's quite natural.
Yeah.
And I think that these feelings stem from somewhere. Where do you think that is?
So I think low self-esteem, right? A lot of it can come down to your how strong are you in your identity of yourself, right? Because if you're confident and you have a good self-esteem, then it really doesn't matter to you what others are doing because it's not taking anything away from you. You know, I have friends who I know are very confident. They're very happy for like the people around them when they do something great. But it doesn't affect them like negatively.
Yeah.
Whereas for a lot of people that can affect them negatively. And that also then, you know, it like causes like friendships to end because of the energy that you're portraying.
The envy and all of the jealousy.
Yeah, the jealousy.
You know, that is a very it's almost like it's easier said than done, right? Like, let's be confident in ourselves and let's just, you know, be proud of who we are and what we've achieved and be happy for other people. And although it may work here and there, but it's hard for some people, I think, to truly achieve that. And it's a journey. It's evolution as well. Like you have to evolve into that person. But I think that, I mean, for myself, for example, there used to be a time when I was younger, I remember I had this relative who used to talk about everybody. And so obviously she used to talk about me as well. And it used to really bother me because most of the time it was all negative stuff, right? And I used to come home and I used to say to my husband, you know, she said this today, she said that, and go on and on and on. And one day he just got up and he's like, oh my God, like you have to stop. Let her say whatever she wants to say. Think about who you are, where you are, and don't worry about it. Like, is it going to change anything about your life? You're sitting here and you're actually only hurting yourself. You're harming yourself. You're not just wasting your time and effort, but you're actually mentally and psychologically affecting your health, right?
For sure.
And so you have to let it go. And I thought, I mean, that's easier said than done, right? So, but I remember I prayed a lot. I really spent a lot of time in prayer, and I really asked God to help me try to become completely free, you know, and disentangled from the noise of all of this gossip and whatever else I would hear. And it took some time, but I think, alhamdulillah, I'm now at a point where I'm quite strong.
Alhamdulillah. And, you know, I think a lot of that comes with age.
Yeah.
Like, oftentimes people would tell me, oh, like, when you enter your 30s, things are going to change. And I was like, age is just a number. Like, how is 30 going to be, like, the magical number? But really, it does. And I don't know where that comes from. Maybe it's because as we get older, we're more focused, like, you know, on our marriage, on our children. We don't really have time for that outside noise.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is, or we're just so confident. I mean, now we've lived 30 some years on this earth, so we're more confident of who we are, what our values are, what type of people we're surrounding ourselves with, you know?
Yes, I think that is very, very important. The company that you keep. And also, like you said, the maturity and the wisdom that comes with age helps you identify better friends, better peers, you know, so that there is more of a healthier circle around you. However, I do have to say that I know a lot of people who are older than us, who still, unfortunately, you know, this is their engagement. And I think it goes very, very strongly back to the company that you keep, right? Because you become who you surround yourself with. And if the people around you are materialistic and are competitive and have elements of envy and jealousy as well, then you're kind of, unknowingly or subconsciously kind of immersed into that
For sure.
race.
And I think it's really important. Like we talked about how a lot of this started from maybe your childhood. But at a certain age in life, your actions no longer are justifiable. I can understand where you're coming from, but it doesn't justify why you did what you did. So we have to make that conscious decision to work on ourselves. So if we have feelings like jealousy or envy, which is normal, right? Like it's okay to feel those things, but recognize that. Recognize that, yes, this is a weakness that I have, and I have to work on this. And then you have to actively work on that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, then, like when you become a mother-in-law or a daughter-in-law or a sister-in-law, whatever it is, those relationships become very difficult to manage. And you're harming yourself now. You have one life to live, right? Yeah. And you're now harming yourself.
Yeah. I oftentimes think you mentioned mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws and all of that. I've heard of women who went through a terrible time when they first got married. Mm-hmm. They were mistreated. They were not respected. They didn't have any acknowledgement or any validation in their house. Yeah. And now they're in a situation where they're the elders, right? Mm-hmm. So she's now become a mother-in-law. And the way I see it, she has two kind of paths that she could take. One path is where she decides to treat her daughter-in-law the same way that she was treated. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of women who do that, who genuinely feel that it's going to toughen up these young girls because they got toughened up and look at how they turned out. Yeah. They raised really good, strong, confident children, and they're very proud of them. And so she then proceeds to treat her daughter-in-law with, no respect, no validation, etc. And then there's the other path that she could take where she could say, like you said, she could do some work. She could self-reflect and think, you know what, my experience was really bad. Yeah. But what I'm going to do is to make sure that this girl who's coming into our home and is starting her life is going to have a really, really good experience. And I'm going to do my best to try to treat her with the type of respect that I never got. Yeah. Just because I know how it feels. I know how my parents felt when their daughter was going through all of this. Yeah. I would not want that to happen to someone else's daughter. Yeah. And so on. And there are women like that as well.
There are, yeah.
Right?
There are.
So I think at every point in life you have a choice.
You do.
And I think it goes back to what you said is it's about self-reflection and self-awareness and understanding how you can break that cycle. Yeah. Those are the key words.
Yeah. And also having that level of empathy, right? Like you mentioned, that for that mother-in-law, she was once a daughter-in-law, right? She can kind of put herself in those shoes and understand, okay, how did I feel when I was in this situation? How, like if someone treated me a certain way, how would that have affected or made my marriage easier or just my transition better, So what can I do to make that easier for my daughter-in-law or vice versa? And I think it's also really important for us to kind of like flip the script when it comes to our in-laws as well, right? Like how society has portrayed in-laws. We've always just grew up with this fear of like, oh my goodness, the mother-in-law or the sister-in-law who's going to do whatever she can plot to ruin your life.
Yes.
Whereas like these are also relationships that can be wonderful. Like they can bring that level of sisterhood and like girlhood that you need to feel empowered if you allow them and take that time to understand and build on those relationships. Mm-hmm. They can be so beautiful. Like my sister-in-laws, like they're my go-tos. Yeah. Like I can talk to them about anything and everything. And, when I got married, my mom said to me, she said, Myda, these relationships are beautiful. Work on these relationships.
Yeah. It's always a work in progress. And I think going back to what you were saying before when I asked, where did these feelings of jealousy and envy and competition come from? And you said low self-esteem. Yeah. So I think low self-esteem, low self-confidence, insecurities, inferiorities, the fear of losing control sometimes, I think, feed into these behaviors. I know for a fact, I know this one lady who had gone through a really tough time early in her marriage. And she was living in a joint family, and then, over the years was able to become independent, etc. She had 3 boys, and she raised them, and it was now time to get them married. And I think the loss of control that she had early on in her marriage, where she lived in that joint family but was never acknowledged, never validated, and had no control over any decisions, any activities that the family would take. She took all of that and invested that energy into raising her sons, whom she thought are going to be the support that she needed from her other relatives and relationships, but never got. Yeah. And so they are now the center of her world. Yeah. So now they're grown up, and it's time for them to get married. And there's this new girl that now comes into the home as the wife of one of the sons. And now she feels that she's losing control, right? Because the son is now split. Yeah. And this is so natural. But because she had that sense of insecurity to begin with, and that need to have the control, it's really hard for her to let her children live the life that they want to live happily, while still respecting her. She doesn't recognize that her respect or value doesn't decrease just because they're off making their own decisions.
She's always going to be the mom.
She's always going. Right. So it's the self-confidence that she needed but was never given, and has now grown up to be, a 60-year-old, 70-year-old woman.
Yeah. So I think that's a really great point, because what ends up happening is that when we have low insecurity, we start projecting that onto other people, right? And so, like, even when we think of bullies in school, regardless of how tough they look on the outside, it's always a matter of low insecurity, and that makes them want to break down other people instead of uplift them, right? And so I think for women as well, we have to be so cognizant and aware of that, because if we're doing that in our homes, then how is that the
ripple effect in the environment?
Exactly, right? Yes. It's going to have such a ripple effect, not just in our homes, but what our children take outside of the home, how they conduct themselves in society.
Yeah. And speaking of children, I mean, this not only just affects our own mental health, but this type of environment in the home. Children observe everything that their parents do, and they listen to everything, they hear everything. And so they're also now learning that you need to constantly be comparing yourself against what's happening, And then they grow up and they internalize these behaviors, and it becomes a part of their personality.
Yeah, 100%.
I know people who are so upset and so angry when other people achieve something, or they hear about someone's child achieving an academic milestone, or someone professionally being recognized, or whatever it is. It may be something that they didn't even want to have in the first place, but they will still not be happy.
Yeah. Or they'll be happy, or they'll say something and then they'll add like a negative. Yeah. Like, oh, that's great, but she's also like, really bad at like, whatever it is. They have to like somehow add a negative in there.
Yes. And it's so important, like you said, to do that self-check as soon as possible, because it can grow into such a poison that then kind of permeates every core, every part of your being, and then just you become a different person. I used to serve as the National Secretary Tarbiyat for Lajna Myda Canada. And I remember I was sitting in a social gathering, and somebody was saying and acknowledging, all of the effort that was going into it. Mm-hmm. And there was another lady sitting there, and she said, at that time I didn't have children. And she said, how many children do you have? And I said, I don't have any right now. And she's like, oh, that's why you're always at the mosque. And I was like, okay. And she's like, no wonder you have so much time to do all of these things. It's because you have nothing else to do at home.
Like she had to downplay your
And I thought, there was another lady who was there who I'm not kidding you, actually said that she knew somebody who used to work really hard for the Jamaat, and she used to pour a lot of time and effort, and was always at the mosque and all of that. And she ended up getting divorced because she didn't spend any time at home, and her husband was just really unhappy with her because she's doing all of this. She actually said that while we were sitting, and I thought, wow, like I think I was aware enough to understand where this was coming from, so it didn't affect me like emotionally or anything. But I just kind of was amazed at the way people think.
It's that sort of thinking.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because I feel like, I guess this is why we're talking about it, because it is so common.
It has become even more and more rampant. I think as people begin to widen their networks, like you said, through social media, they're so connected, not just with strangers around the world, but even within families and relatives. You're so hyper aware of what's happening in other people's lives.
Yeah. But it's unfortunate because carrying these sort of thoughts and feelings, it's very heavy.
Yeah.
Like physically, you can see how it affects you.
Yeah.
You know, it's actually a lot better for you to just be a happier person.
Yes.
You feel better.
Yes.
But when you have these sort of thoughts, you're negative. I don't know, when I feel like if I'm ever going to that sort of slump where those negative thoughts are like creeping in, I feel really bad about myself. It's a heavy feeling to live with.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But like you said, it's not a lot of people who will recognize that, right?
Yeah.
I think that they feel that it's almost a must, that we must be in the race. If we're not in the race, we're going to become irrelevant. Right?
Yeah.
How do we stop this harmful cycle? I know you said self-reflection, self-awareness. How do you begin?
I mean, I think for me at this age, like my goal right now is like, how do I instill that in my children, right? I'm a mother. I have young children. My daughter is 5 years old. So like my goal now is to create her to be strong, to have high self-esteem, to know what her worth is and not be focused with like, you know, just like what other people are doing. Be more focused on her goals, what her vision for herself is. The other day, you know, she came home from school and she was like, oh, Mom, you know, such and such, they're going to a cruise for their birthday. And the way she said it, you know, like, I wish we could do that, which is normal, right? She's 5 years old. And like, I could have in that conversation, I could have done two things. I could have been like, oh, yeah, you know why? She's so lucky. But if I said that, she would have started comparing, right? Like, oh, she's lucky. She got that. Maybe I'm not lucky. We're not doing that. So instead, and it was a moment, literally, I like had to stop so that I could answer. And I was just like, oh, you know, I'm so happy for them. That sounds so exciting. And instantly she's like, oh, yeah, that is cool. And she just like left the conversation and, you know, started playing. Yeah. But it's just like how we phrase things, how we communicate. And I think that's what we also need to do for ourselves. Yeah. How do we build our self-esteem up? Use positive words, right? Like, I know sometimes it seems very cliche to use affirmations, but hype yourself up.
To take a step back and celebrate your achievements.
Yes.
When you are able to achieve a goal, to take a moment and be very grateful for that moment, grateful for the blessing, and pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, celebrate yourself. How many, you know, milestones have we accomplished?
Yeah.
But if we're so busy invested in other people's lives, then obviously we're not going to be able to see everything we've been able to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, faith, of course, plays such an important role in all of this, I think, in centering ourselves, in really subscribing to the virtues of patience, you know, sabr, and gratitude, shukr.
Yeah.
And I think that if we were to center ourselves back and align ourselves with these virtues and spend some time being grateful and spend some time also being patient, because God has a plan for you.
Yeah, and I think it 100% always comes down to faith, right? Like if we trust in Allah's plan, then we know that whatever someone else has, and if it's meant for us, we will get it. Maybe it's not our time yet.
Yes.
I think if we start counting all the things, all the blessings we have, you know, it's endless.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time I say something to my husband at home about so-and-so, you know, they did this, they did that, or they got this, he always comes back to happiness and contentment.
Yeah.
Yes, they may have all of these things, but are they as happy as you? Are you not happier? Are you not more content? Yeah. And that contentment, you know, as Allah Ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, is that what brings you the comfort of your heart? It's remembrance of God, right? And so when we go back to our faith and connect ourselves with our faith, I think we are able to we are able to become more confident in ourselves because our faith will strengthen us and guide us, right, as we move forward and navigate these. And I think also changing the narrative when someone else is able to achieve a milestone, not going into depression and anxiety because they were able to,
Exactly, yeah.
but rather be happy for them and then pray for yourself. If it is genuinely an objective of yours as well to achieve that, then to be, patient and grateful and pray.
Yeah.
And I think that would be the best response, and that's how you build, I think, sisterhood. That's how you build a community of women that support one another, that are there to validate one another, acknowledge one another, celebrate one another.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to recognize that what we see, right? It's very surface level. We are not inside someone else's home. Yeah. We don't know all the challenges they are going through. So if something good comes their way, be happy for them, because this life is all about struggle. Yeah. If you're struggling, guaranteed everyone around you is struggling, right?
It's true.
So if something good comes their way, be happy for them.
And it might be that that person A has failed 9 times.
Exactly.
And then the 10th time they succeeded, which is the success you hear about.
Yeah.
But you're so jealous that how did they, you've forgotten their struggle by the time they got
their journey.
There. Yeah.
You don't know how long it took
for
them. Exactly.
So we have to be vigilant about that. I think Lajna-e-Myla as an organization that is for women, by women, I think provides us with such a blessed platform, for us to grow in our confidence, in our faith together, in a non-judgmental, safe space. If we think about all of the different departments and all of their activities and the events, what better place for young women and women of all ages to come together and really become that reality of true sisterhood.
100%. Recently I got the opportunity to volunteer. So we were surrounded by Lajna that were, these girls they were educated, they were confident, they were smart, they were funny, they were witty, they were charismatic, they were creative. And to be around a group of Lajna like that, it was electrifying. Literally, you could sense that energy and it wanted you to do more. And that sort of competition, I think what we touched upon earlier, there's healthy competition, right? And that competition didn't come from jealousy or envy. It came from inspiration. It came from admiration, right? I was inspired by these Lajna and I wanted to be better. So I think it goes down to the verse of the Holy Quran where compete with one another in good works, right?
Yes.
So there is healthy competition, but we have to be aware, is this competition leading us to happiness, or is this competition leading and closer to Allah? Or is this competition leading us to low self-esteem, anxiety, and also worldly things and taking us away from God?
Yes.
Right? Because now jealousy and all of that is creeping in.
And the added blessing is that because we've come together solely for the sake of our faith, there's added blessings for those who participate to grow manyfold in their confidence and in their faith, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Any last thoughts before we go?
Yeah, I think just, the empowerment that we find through Sisterhood of Lajna-e-Myla is something that we really need to appreciate and recognize, and also, put that effort in to create those close ties with other Lajna members so we can have that sort of sisterhood, that feeling that you get, that positivity. It empowers you like no other feeling.
And it empowers not only just you, it empowers your family, it empowers your children, and it can have such a transformative ripple effect in society.
Yeah, 100%.
Jazakallah, Myda. That was such an insightful conversation. I really, really enjoyed our discussion. That's all the time that we have today. Jazakallah once again.
Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.